Hi guys! Today I want to share with you my favourite books of 2019 so far. I love filming this video every summer and getting to look back at the end of the year at the books I was enjoying at the midpoint. I feel like this year, again, just like last year, I've chosen a really good selection of books, and so far this year, even though I haven't read lots and lots this year, in previous years I've read a lot more by this point, I feel like the books I've read I've really loved, and I've read some new all-time favourite books. So I'm looking forward to sharing them with you today, and hopefully you will pick up some recommendations at the same time. So I'd like to start by talking to you about two books by the same author, and they are A Sky Painted Gold and Under a Dancing Star, both by Laura Wood. These are historical YA books, and they are honestly the best YA books that I have read in years. I love them so much. They are by far the best books I have read so far this year, and I just can't stop thinking about them. So A Sky Painted Gold was Laura Wood's first YA book, and it is set in 1920s Cornwall and is about a girl called Lou who becomes obsessed with the Cardew siblings who live on an island just off the coast of Cornwall. It is set during the summer and you can feel the warmth coming off every page. I'd recommend this if you liked The Great Gatsby, and also if you liked Rebecca. I feel like it's a good mix of the two. I loved the romance in this. I loved Lou's journey throughout the book. Even though there is a romance and this romantic feel to it, you also feel like you're learning a lot about her, and she's going through a lot of progress as a character and becoming a better person. It also feels like a very classic coming of age story, and I know that lots of you have been loving this since I first started talking about it on my channel. I honestly haven't shut up about it all year, and I've become obsessed with Laura Wood's books now. The thing with historical YA is that I love it so much, and yet publishers don't really think that it sells, and so they haven't been investing heavily in it. And so coming across Laura Wood and reading her books feels like such a treat, because there's nothing else like it out there at the moment. So after I read A Sky Painted Gold, I really didn't know what to do with myself, and I knew that Laura had a new book coming out, and so I kind of begged the publisher to send me a review copy, and they did, and I got to read it. And this is, I mean, I loved A Sky Painted Gold so much, and then I read Under a Dancing Star and I fell completely in love. I can't remember a time that I loved a book so much, and I just thought it was the best. I read it in a day. I still can't stop thinking about it. I want to reread it. It is, I mean, A Sky Painted Gold was romantic, and then I read Under a Dancing Star and I just swooned the entire way through. So whereas A Sky Painted Gold is set in 1920s Cornwall, this is set in 1930s Italy, around the time that a lot was happening in Italy and a lot was changing with politics, and the surroundings were leading up into the war years, and so things are becoming a bit more complicated now. And amongst this atmosphere, you have the story of Bee and Ben. And if those names sound familiar, you are right, because this is a retelling of Much Ado About Nothing, which is my favourite Shakespeare play. I studied Much Ado About Nothing when I was at school, and so I have watched a lot of the adaptations. I've read it so many times, and I wasn't quite sure how Laura Wood was going to capture the essence of the book, but she really has. It took everything I loved most from the play and made it even better, if that is possible. It has this very warm feel to it again, and so it feels very summery. It's the perfect book to take on your summer holiday with you, but at the same time there is a lot of serious stuff going on, and I liked the balance of the two. They're the kind of books you can reread time and time again, and I think they are future YA classics. I love them so much. Next up, I'd like to talk to you about Howard's End by E.M. Forster, another one of my favourite authors this year. I read A Room with a View last year and liked it, and liked a lot of the themes in it, but I wasn't overly in love with it. But then I read Howard's End and I realised everything that had been missing from A Room with a View, because I love this book so much. Howard's End was written in 1910, so right at the end of the Edwardian period, and for me, E.M. Forster sums up exactly what it was like to be an Edwardian. He talks a lot about the issues of the day, the changing of the classes, and how the middle class really starts to rise. He also talks a lot in his writing about the change as you enter the Edwardian period from the Victorian period and how society is changing because of it. We're moving into the 20th century. We are a decade in by the point that Howard's End was written. And so you do feel like the people living at this time were in a transitional period and not really sure what's going to come next. As a reader, of course, we know that only a few years later the First World War is going to begin and lives are going to change all over again. Howard's End follows three groups of people: the Wilcoxes, the Schlegels and the Basts, and they are three different classes of people and their lives become connected throughout the course of the book. The book opens with Helen Schlegel sending a letter to her sister Margaret saying that she's become engaged to one of the Wilcox brothers, and then actually as you get into the first chapter you realise that the engagement has been false and it's been called off and wasn't really a thing to begin with, but this is where the connections start. And as you go through the book, E.M. Forster points out what it's like to live around other people, how we influence each other, how every decision we make affects everybody else too, and so it is this idea of only connect. The actions affect other people, that other people affect our actions, and that life is all connected and we aren't in isolation. I honestly think this is one of the most clever books that I have ever read. I love it so much. I want to reread it. I want to write neo-Edwardian fiction now because I've read a lot of neo-Victorian. Never really read much neo-Edwardian, and so I'm kind of planning out a book to write one day in the far future I should expect. But it's really made me think about the Edwardian period as a period of social change and also as a period of change in literature too. You have a lot of new genres coming through, and I think that E.M. Forster really sums up what it's like to be an Edwardian, and I can't get enough of Edwardian fiction now. I just went and ordered myself lots more because I want to read more and more and more. And one of my goals for the next few years is to read all of E.M. Forster's books because after reading Howard's End, he's become a new favourite author. By this point in the video, you're probably becoming very bored of me saying the phrase new favourite author, but hear me out, I've got another one. I read all of Eva Ibbetson's adult books this year so far. I was going to pace myself, but I've read them all, and my favourite, and honestly one of my favourite books of all time now, is The Morning Gift. This is incredible. I love this book so much. Another one that I keep sneakily rereading when I should be reading other stuff. This book is something that I want everybody to read because I want somebody to talk to about it. So The Morning Gift is set against the backdrop of the Anschluss, the annexation of Austria during the Second World War, and it follows a girl called Ruth who is trying to escape Austria, and to do so she marries a man called Quinn. Ruth and Quinn's marriage is not supposed to be something that is real, it's supposed to be something that helps her escape the country, and yet it is this amazing romance and so sweet and so careful as well. This is the longest of Eva Ibbetson's adult novels and I think it really pays off. I've struggled with some of her shorter ones because I don't feel like you get the time to get to know the characters, but seriously I could have read this book all over again, and I wish that Eva Ibbetson had written a sequel because I wanted to get to know the characters even better. I wanted to live my life alongside theirs. It was such a perfect book in every single way. Even though this was written in 1993, there was still something very current about it, so it talks a lot about being a refugee and what it means to be a refugee during the war, and I feel like that can say a lot about our current climate now and how it is to be away from your home and knowing that you love your home and yet you cannot be there, knowing that you're surrounded by people and you're lucky to have the people you've come with because so many people didn't make it. I think there is a very strong message behind this book, and yet it is framed in such a lovely way that you can't help but enjoy this book even though there are very difficult subjects being discussed at the same time. All of Eva Ibbetson's books follow the same framework and the same structure, so it almost does feel like you're reading the same book over and over again, but that's the reason that I've fallen in love with them, because they feel like an old friend. And then the final book I want to talk to you about is actually the first classic that I read this year, and it was Cold Comfort Farm by by Stella Gibbons. This is such a funny, genius book that as soon as I read, I knew I was going to love, and I knew that I wanted to read more of Stella Gibbons's work. Cold Comfort Farm is basically a parody on lots of nature and farming novels that were popular around the 1930s. It looks at rural life in an over-the-top and hilarious way, and starts with our main character, Flora Post, moving in with her aunt and uncle and cousins on their farm, Cold Comfort Farm. It looks at each character in detail, so you know each one by the end of the novel, and you know them inside and out in ways that you maybe wouldn't have expected to know them. There's Aunt Ada Doom, who has seen something in the coal shed, and that's all she repeats ever. She's a recluse who never comes out of her room. There is Seth, who is a womanizer and is also obsessed with movies. There's Elphine, who is a child of nature, and in a way I fell in love with the Starcadders, but I don't think you're supposed to fall in love with them. I think you're just supposed to laugh at them and know that they are a caricature of other characters and that they really do serve that purpose. If you're looking for a book that doesn't take itself too seriously and will give you a good laugh, then you need to read Cold Comfort Farm. So those were my favourite books of 2019 so far. I'd love to know in the comments what your favourite books of the year so far have been, and I will see you guys soon. Happy reading!